So this site has absolutely gone to the moon over the Christmas holidays. And just to give you a bit of insight as to what this looks like in Google Search Console as well, so it's not just an Ahrefs thing. If anything, I actually think Ahrefs is massively undershooting what the numbers look like. We rolled out a bunch of SEO fixes just before the holiday season started, and it was great to come back in sort of 1 or 2 weeks ago and just to see the keywords absolutely take off. Now, not to say that this hasn't come with issues. You can sort of see that there's a whole host of indexing errors down here, but the most important thing is that we now have Google accessing more of the page content, which is what wasn't happening prior to these fixes going in place. And what I'm going to do is essentially just run you through all these tactics that we rolled out that are absolutely essential if you work on big websites. So websites with 10,000 plus pages. So this site here, we're probably looking at roughly over 1 million URLs, if not more. A variety of static, dynamically created pages, pages that exist across different countries and languages. And I'll go through all of that in just a bit. So a quick plug, if you want access to the show notes here, sign up to the link in the description. You'll get a link to a Notion board, and the Notion board essentially lists out all of the videos that we've produced, and then it will attach all the show notes for each of those videos. So for example, the last video that I put together, which was talking about creating content that ranks top and ranks in the AI overview, I walked through a Google Doc, which you have access here, or if you're too lazy to click that, I've actually just straight up copied and pasted all the sort of essential bits down here. So that's free for you to do. Another quick plug on top of the quick plug, as always, if you're a B2B company, you're looking to drive more pipeline this year in 2025, reach out to sessionmedia.com. We're a performance marketing exclusively for B2B brands. Fill in the proposal, or if you can't be bothered to do that, just connect with me on LinkedIn and drop me a DM. Okay, I'm going to run through all the tactics that we rolled out just before December, and hopefully you guys get some value on this. So let's go through the document. Let's blow it up so you guys can see it. So this is in no particular order, really. This is just as and when they came to mind. So the first thing, or one of the things we looked at, was ensuring we've got self-referencing canonicals, and we're canonicalizing duplicate pages. So I'm going to go through G2 and give you an example of what I'm talking about using G2 instead of our client for privacy reasons. Hopefully you guys can understand that. So self-referencing canonicals, when you've got a site that has multiple URLs serving the same content, we need to ensure that we're telling Google which page to index. Now, Google has got better with this, but the more they have to think about it, the more resource they use, the higher the cost they have to do to execute all of those commands, the less likely they are to essentially index your desired pages, right? So if I am looking for, say, an HR software provider of some kind, and I'm going through G2 down here, let's say I'm looking at HCM software, so human capital management software, I'm looking at something for small business, and let's say I'm looking for something that's 5-star, for example, you'll notice up at the top here that G2 has a static URL up to small business, and then when I put the price in, it creates a dynamic URL using a query string. So although this content is very similar to the content without the 5 stars, we need to tell Google which is the priority page, so to speak. So the best way to manage this is we will canonicalize the page that has the query string back to the page with the static URL. So if I go back to the 5-star query string, you can see if you do a search of the canonical, it points back to small business, even though the query string had the 5-star rating. And that's all we need to do. Now, as I said, Google is better at managing this, but it helps to make it easier for them. I must also add the caveat that this isn't a command, it's a directive. So Google could ignore it if they really wanted to and choose their own canonicals. And sometimes you might see that in your Google Search Console where it says Google selected canonical, for example. But this helps preserve call budget and bloat as well. So that was one of the key things we did with this site. Another thing is just making sure that the hreflang tags, yes, of course, make sure they're set up. So if you've got the same content in English as you do in German and Spanish, make sure that your hreflang tags are set up correctly. But one of the most common things that I come across that are missed when these are set up is making sure that these are self-referencing as well. So if you're the English version of that page, you need to tell Google that you're the English version of that page. So, okay, we've got this page in German. I'm going to jump into the source of this, and we can see straight away that it's tagged up with a handful of different languages. So we've got the EM version here. I'm on the Dutch page, so we need to make sure that we've told Google that this is the Dutch page. So you can see this is here, which is great. In the cases that I was speaking about, quite often this row wouldn't exist. So we wouldn't say that we're the Dutch German, of course. We wouldn't say that we're the German page, for example. So it's really important that this is self-referencing. Without these, Google may not understand the relationship between all the pages, which, if anything, will lead to crawl inefficiency. Again, Google is pretty good at understanding a website architecture, and they'll probably see through the internal links that the pages are related, but don't make it harder for them than you need to. It's only going to cost you at some point. There's not too much I can check on this one, but just making sure that you're scaling up your server resources, so on your CPU and your memory, so that it can handle the large load. And consider things like rate limiting as well to manage sort of traffic spikes and inconsistencies in crawl requests or spikes in crawl requests as well. Otherwise, you might have a series of 500 error codes, for example, which was the case for this site. And then as we move down, this is more sort of, I'd say, SEO 101. So making sure your internals are always pointing to a 200 status code page. So, for example, each of these G2 pages have hundreds of internal links. I'll tell you what, I'm just going to go back to the English version just to make things a little bit easier for us. But all of these have got hundreds of internal links. So we want to make sure that all these pages that we're linking to are loading a 200 status code. And ironically, it looks like we might have a few issues here. So this is actually jumping through a JavaScript redirect. It might have something to do with the fact that it's sitting on a subdomain, although that is, I'd say that's probably not being handled correctly. Let's see if we can find a static URL. So consulting services, I click here, we can see the consulting serves a 200 status. This is exactly what we want. So we don't want any redirects in between the internals. We don't obviously want to link people to a 404 page or a dead page. We want the page to be serving a 200 as G2 is doing in that instance, but not on the subdomain. So crawl the site, pick up any incorrectly linked internal links. As you get bigger sites, you also want to scope sort of dynamic title and metas as well. Much of this can be built in the system these days, to be totally honest. So you create a page, it automatically populates a title based on the page heading. You can, of course, use programmatic SEO to dynamically scope title and meta in a spreadsheet, as you can with some of the content as well, and I'll touch on that in a little bit. Don't worry too much about duplicate titles because they are going to happen, especially if you have paginated pages. So if I'm on HR software and I go to page 2, page 3, page 4, we know that those titles are probably going to be HR software. It might have like dash page 2, for example, but those duplicates aren't anything to worry about. They're not really going to impact your performance in any way, so just ignore them. What you want to do is just make sure that you've got a curated title and a curated meta for your key sort of static pages. So for example, when I was looking at the HR software and the HCM software, for example, we want to make sure that we've got a title that's quite more enticing for the user to click, and a meta description that also is enticing for users to click as well, right? But to manage these at scale, make sure that the fields are dynamic, because it will save you a lot of time and resource. There's no point writing those these days. I don't know anyone that would, to be honest. Ensuring sound page categorization. So this one probably should be bumped a little bit further to the top. But when you come onto G2, obviously it's a site that's got probably close to 1 million URLs, if not more, especially with the country variations as well. When I hover over the software drop down, it takes me into different buckets of software. So I've got marketing software, for example, and then within marketing software, I've got ABM, I've got content marketing, I've got email marketing, for example. So this means that the crawler can go to a subset of pages far easier than having to crawl the site and maybe stumble across these pages because they're linked to from a blog or something like that. So this indicates that the page categories have importance. They will be some of the first pages that a crawler looks at because of where they sit in the navigation and in the website hierarchy. And the positive here is that obviously these are static URLs that G2 will want to be serving in a search engine. So things like best chatbots software will no doubt be a target keyword. A crawler can find this page within sort of one click. And so this is what we would call essentially like SEO best practice. Moving on to some of the other factors as well. As your site grows and as you have dynamic fields, you will at some point come across soft 404s. So this essentially means that a page loads successfully, but the page really only contains the header, the footer, and maybe some boilerplate text in the middle. So there's no real sort of unique content there, but there is content, which is why it's a soft 404. Someone with more patience than me will probably have accidentally stumbled across some of these in G2. I'm not going to waste your time, but the best way to manage them is either just setting them as a 404 or setting them as a 410, which tells Google that they've been removed. And the reason we'll do this is because we want to preserve crawl budget. Basically, we want to make sure that the crawl budget provided to us, in a sense, is focused on those highly important pages that we want found through search. Moving into dynamically created text, I touched on this with the title and the meta, but for each of your pages, you just want to ensure that we've got some info text up at the top here. So if you're operating a rating and reviews or a directory type site, having unique text at the top here is a great signal for Google. It's a great signal for the user as well. You can, as G2 have done, also use it as an opportunity to internally link to deeper category pages that have a lot of relevant text sort of before and after it, which we know is a good signal for SEO. So a crawler will have a look at the sentences before and the sentences after to essentially understand the context of the link that the crawler will follow through on. And, you know, as well, if we have a page that maybe in this case only has one listing or two listings or something like that, adding a little bit more content here gives us a better opportunity to appear for the target keyword it's going after. So what I've been doing is just playing around with some of the languages on the best chatbots software landing page, which is how I've ended up on here. And then I think one of the most important parts to this as well is just ensuring that not everything is sat behind some form of authentication. If that isn't managed properly, a crawler will not be able to access the content, therefore it can't serve it in the index, and therefore we potentially lose that visitor. So of course we might have some content that's stuck behind a paywall, a paywall of some kind, and that can be managed in a particular way. But for the best part, we want to expose as much of our content to or into the public domain as we can. And then just to finish this off, technical SEO to this sort of level isn't necessary for all types of sites. Bigger the site, i.e. if your site is above 10,000 URLs, I would say the more resource should be put into technical SEO. Anything that's sort of sub 10,000 URLs, it should have a review of the sort of technical setup, make sure that there's nothing critical stopping a crawler from finding your site and being able to render the content, but the importance of it is likely diminished. It should be easier to isolate incidents and resolve them quite quickly as well. Additionally, one of the things you can look out for is the fail rate of a crawler. So if you come into Search Console, go into settings, have a look at host status, and then have a look at your server connectivity and your DNS resolution, your fail rate should always be under the sort of outlying couple of percentage points that Google allow as an acceptable fail rate. So in the site that I've just run through, not G2, but one of our clients, the fail rate was in like the 60 and 70%. So Google essentially couldn't connect with the server across many of the different pages, which was a huge red flag. So the priority fix went in to resolve that before anything else. And that's the last thing I'll leave you with, is just make sure that you're prioritizing the things that have the biggest impact, i.e. if a crawler cannot index your site or find your site, the priority fix needs to be on resolving that bit there. Your title and meta changes can be right way down the bottom of that list. Hopefully you got some value out of that, and it's not a total rambling. As mentioned, if you want the show notes, sign up in the link in the description. You'll get access to the Notion board. If you have any questions, then leave them in the comments below. Otherwise, I'll see you on the next video.